Hello, I'm Paul Michelman, Director of Content for Harvard Business Digital, and I'm here today with John Elkington, the founder and chief entrepreneur of Sustainability, a strategy consulting firm, and the author of the Harvard Business School Press book, The Power of Unreasonable People. John, thanks for joining us today.
It's a great pleasure, Paul.
John, our mission for today is to help our audience understand some of the core characteristics of highly effective social entrepreneurs. But before we get to the details, would you give us the 90-second elevator pitch for your book's big idea?
To try and get it into 90 seconds is almost impossible, but Klaus Schwab, who founded the World Economic Forum something like 35 years ago, in his foreword talks about the ways in which this new category of entrepreneurs is trying to address some of the really big social and environmental problems in the world, poverty right through to climate change. And I think what's interesting to remember, at least for me, is that when we tried to get the World Economic Forum CEO and so on community to engage with these people about 6-7 years ago, we had a big event in New York and virtually no one turned up for it. That's changed now, and if you go to the Davos summits, or I've just come back from China, from the World Economic Forum summit in Dalian, these social entrepreneurs are on all the panels now. They're people that the mainstream of business and public policy really want to hear from. And the reason is that these people are thinking not just about solutions, but solutions that can be replicated, that can be scaled, and have a real chance of addressing some of these very big challenges that we collectively face.
So back to our mission, our core mission for today, which is to look at some of those essential traits that highlight particularly effective social entrepreneurs. And you list quite a number in your book, and we're going to get to some, but not all of them today. Several of these strike me as counterintuitive. For instance, social entrepreneurs are unreasonable. What do you mean by that?
Well, the original idea of that came from the playwright George Bernard Shaw, who basically said, the reasonable man adapts himself to the world as he finds it. The unreasonable person tries to transform it to make it different. And I think these entrepreneurs, if they have one single shared characteristic, it is that they simply don't take the world as it currently is as a given. They are trying to, they're in effect game changers. They're not simply trying to sort of tweak the system at the edges. They're trying to change the system. So they are wildly ambitious. Some, if not most of them, have been called crazy at various parts of their lives and careers, by family, by friends, by colleagues. To some degree, that's true, but Muhammad Yunus, who just got the Nobel Peace Prize for his work as a social entrepreneur, once described these people to Pamela Hartigan, my co-author, and myself, as 70% crazy. And I think that neatly sums it up.
Okay, so perhaps this is a similar trait in that case. Effective social entrepreneurs are propelled by emotion. Now, that's not what your typical venture capitalist wants to hear. They want a sound business case. So how do we rectify that?
I wonder about that, because I think venture capitalists respond to people with real passion, real drive, really wanting to develop a business proposition or a technology, whatever. Very, very often those people are emotionally driven. If you go back to the Wright brothers on the sand dunes at Kitty Hawk, these were technical people, but they were powered by emotion as well. The difference here is that the emotion isn't around making money or showing that you're better than your competitors or whatever. The emotion here is about trying to address the issues of a world with, say, 4 billion people living in conditions of fairly substantial poverty. So I think most entrepreneurs are emotional. These just happen to be engaged with a different set of challenges.
Is there somebody kind of top of mind who exemplifies this characteristic?
Well, I mentioned Muhammad Yunus, so let me take another, Wangari Maathai, who got the Nobel Peace Prize 2 years previously in 2004. When she originally in East Africa told her colleagues that she wanted to plant trees across much of the growing desert belt in that region of the world, they simply thought she was, again, being unreasonable. In fact, when she went to the supplier of trees and said that she wanted so many million trees, he said, yes, fine, whatever you want. And then when she came back and she needed that number of trees, he didn't have them. He thought she was simply making it up. So she's now planted something like 30 million trees, and so it goes. So I think these people have the capacity to do things that others think just is impossible.
And yet you say social entrepreneurs seek profit in unprofitable pursuits. How does that work into this?
Well, define profit. That's what we're struggling with, because for these people, it isn't simply a financial profit. Most of them wouldn't be in this game if that was all they were after, because most of these people are addressing areas of quite substantial market failure. But what they're looking at is a form of profit, which some could define as or explain as blended value. So you're looking at the financial side, absolutely, but you're also looking at the social and, in some cases, environmental value that's created at the same time. So many of these people are really very interesting in the terms of the way in which they're now trying to measure their social and environmental impact. And I've been fascinated just in recent years to see Fast Company starting to do the annual award around these sort of social capitalists, as they describe them. I think big business and I think public policymakers have a great deal to learn from some of these entrepreneurs, because they're not only going after forms of value that many of these others mainstream people talk about, but they're increasingly working out how to not only deliver it, but to measure real progress, and then to work out how over a period of time you put real value on that.
Can you help us understand blended value a little bit more? Maybe an example of a good example?
Well, if you think about Muhammad Yunus, just to take an example that has been in people's minds recently, he set up the Grameen Bank, and that, I mean, you could say if you were looking for profitability solely, that's been a very interesting example of that. And you've got the big banks like Citi sort of piling into that same market now that they can see it is potentially real. But if you were looking at the improvement in the livelihoods of the predominantly women and their families, their children in particular, who've taken some of those microloans and developed businesses and so on, it's not simply a question of money. It's a question of self-confidence. It's a question of new connections that they're being able to make. It's a question of not having to waste all of the time to go to market to sell something that people don't want, that by using telephones and so on, they can actually determine in advance what the market wants. And if they have to walk 2 or 3 days to market, that's worth having done. So how do you measure all of that? At the moment, markets aren't very good at doing that, but over a period of time, I think they will become much better.
We tend to think of people who give their life to social causes as being humble, as wanting to be subservient to some greater good. And yet you talk about social entrepreneurs as being, and I believe I'm quoting you, insanely ambitious. How does that work? Well, some of them are really quite difficult. Let's put it that way. I mean, because they simply are impatient. They want to drive change. They really won't take no for an answer. But the difference is that they're not simply doing this out of their own self-defined ambition. They're doing it because they're trying to help, sincerely trying to help people in the wider world. So I think if a Muhammad Yunus or a Wangari Maathai had said 15, 20 years ago, this is what we plan to do, people have said, you're crazy. I mean, this simply is undoable. What they've shown is it's not only doable, but that once you get it done, things start to build. And I think what's really extraordinary is to see the way in which some of these entrepreneurs now are developing initiatives that are starting to feed into each other, to reinforce each other. And so if you take the individual entrepreneur, it's clear that they can't do what they're pledging themselves to do. But you look at their high-performance teams, you look at some of the people now, people like Bill Gates, Pierre Omidyar, Jeff Skoll, some of these sort of extraordinarily wealthy people are now piling in behind to support some of this work. You suddenly start to think, well, maybe they're not quite as ambitious as they once sounded. Maybe we should all be that ambitious. On that note, John Elkington, thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. For more great ideas from Harvard Business, please visit our website at www.harvardbusiness.org. Thanks for listening.